William and Spencer had known each other since their university days, when they studied physics and technology together. The guys were literally obsessed with science at the time and dreamed of a career as great scientists. Teachers always praised the capable students, who even looked so much alike that they could have been brothers. After the graduation, William and Spencer found themselves at a crossroads. The young men understood that their future life depended on what choice they made at that time. On the one hand, the talented graduates could continue to work in science, and on the other hand, they could go into independent sailing, so to say, trying themselves out in business and commerce. It's hard to say why the young men preferred the second option, but it ultimately led them to wealth and success. Fresh out of college, the graduates subconsciously chose the most promising field in business, which was aimed at the sale and implementation of computer technology in many areas of public life. Starting small, William and Spencer have grown their business over the years. They went from being small dealers of used computers to successful entrepreneurs and owners of an extensive network of shops specializing in the sale of office and home appliances. This is probably the perfect example of how a person chose to sacrifice something in life and thus gains happiness and prosperity. William and Spencer gave up science in favor of going into business, but in return, they gained freedom and financial independence. There have never been any disagreements or any friction between the young entrepreneurs. The guys understood each other perfectly and honestly divided the profit in half. When the young businessmen stood firmly on their feet, they almost simultaneously got married and then had children. Spencer had a daughter, Sydney, and William had a son, Michael. Since the businessmen lived within walking distance from each other, their children were friends from early childhood. Playing together on the front lawn, they made their parents very happy. Time passed, but the families of William and Spencer were still friends. When Michael and Sydney grew up and graduated high school, their parents sent them to study in Europe. It so happened that the young people got admitted to different universities, so they could only see each other during the holidays. At the university, Michael got very interested in basketball and even played on the varsity team. And Sydney took up a different hobby, rhythmic gymnastics. Both kids changed a lot during their time in college, both physically and mentally, and it couldn't go unnoticed by their parents. By junior year, Michael turned into a 2-meter-high, handsome young man, and Sydney became the regular winner of university-wide beauty contests. "They're going to make a beautiful bride and groom one day," Spencer liked to say on occasion, glancing slyly at William. And although the young people denied it, everything seemed to point to the fact that they were actually destined to be together. Of course, without the help of their parents, Michael and Sydney would have probably kept being close friends for a long time. But neither William nor Spencer liked this option. Most of all, the two fathers wanted to intermarry and cement their already strong relationship with the union of their children. In order to speed up the process, the parents invited Michael and Sydney to stay at their house by the lake, which they built as a vacation home. There was even a pier there and a small bench with pebbles and sand. Wondering why the parents invited them to go out of town, the young people spent a lot of time swimming, sunbathing, and just fooling around. At some point, Michael suggested that they take a boat to the opposite shore, which looked as if no human had ever set foot there. The young woman agreed, and when Michael took up the oars, their little boat quickly glided along the blue surface of the lake. When they reached the middle of the lake, the young man put down the oars and admired the view that opened up before him. Openly admiring the nature around them, Sydney smiled and took out her phone from her pocket to take a selfie with Michael. At that moment, the young people moved in closer together, trying to get a good angle for their picture, and to their surprise, they kissed. It looked like an accident at first, but then, when they kissed again, both Michael and Sydney realized that they'd been in love with each other for a long time. After that memorable day at the lake, Michael and Sydney started dating, which made their parents incredibly happy. And about 6 months later, Michael proposed to Sydney at the very same lake house. Yes, I say yes. the girl exclaimed joyfully and threw herself into the arms of her now fiancé. This is probably the best news their parents got in years. To celebrate the happy occasion, the parents decided to throw an engagement party for Michael and Sydney. They rented a yacht and were planning to take it out into the ocean for the party. The weather was warm and sunny, which made the event even more pleasant and joyful. The young couple, unlike their parents, were dressed in beach clothes as they intended to swim in the coastal waters. The celebration was in full swing when Michael, at the request of one of the guests, went to get another bottle of champagne. Hurrying to get the drink, the guy went too fast and slipped on the wet deck, falling onto the wooden platform. Michael felt something snap upon impact, which was followed by a flash of sharp pain in his lower back. Unfortunately, the party was in full swing and the man's absence wasn't immediately noticed. But when Sydney got alarmed and went looking for her fiancé, she found him lying on the wet deck. The guy was moving his arms helplessly, desperately trying to get up, all the while trying not to focus on the fact that he couldn't feel his legs at all. "What happened, honey? Are you hurt?" exclaimed Sydney and rushed to her fiancé. Soon there was a whole crowd of people on the deck, looking with pity at Michael, who was writhing in pain, unable to get up. Realizing how serious the situation was, Spencer immediately headed for the shore, where an ambulance that William had called was already waiting for them. Since Michael had apparently suffered a spinal injury, he had to be transported with extreme care. But despite all the best efforts, the young man had to endure a lot of pain before he finally got to the hospital. At first, Michael looked hopefully into the eyes of the doctors, trying to see something encouraging in them. But then, when the man learned that he had a compression fracture of the spine, he understood everything. Michael was an athlete in the past, so he was well aware of what these fateful words meant. "Oh God, am I going to be handicapped? Will I have to live the rest of my life in a wheelchair?" he thought, trying desperately not to cry. Of course, when his parents and Sydney were visiting, Michael transformed and hid his pain and fear behind a mask of cordiality and nonchalance. But as soon as the door behind his relatives closed, the man plunged back into his sad thoughts. Time passed, and it didn't bring any relief to Michael's exhausted body. To top it off, Michael was in great pain from bed sores, which forms when a body stays in one position for a long time. Sydney supported her fiancé through all of it as best she could. She even learned how to massage his lifeless legs. Unfortunately, nothing helped. One day, when Michael was suffering from terrible depression, he decided that he should call off their engagement and tell Sydney that from that point on, she was free. The young man thought that his injury would hold his fiancée back, especially now that it looked like it was going to be a lifelong condition. "Sydney, I want to talk to you. Basically, I won't be holding you back anymore. You're free to live your life as you please. I'm a disabled person now, and I'm confined to a wheelchair for the rest of my life," said Michael, desperately trying to calm his trembling voice. At first, Sydney thought that she must have misheard Michael, but when his words finally sank in, she buried her face in his hands and started crying. "I've been trying to share Michael's pain all this time, but all he's thinking about is how to get rid of me," Sydney thought, sobbing, feeling humiliated and insulted. Without saying a word, the crying woman left the room and quickly headed for the exit. Biting his lips in despair, Michael watched her go. He couldn't help but feel mad at himself for his stupid words that hurt the woman he loved so deeply. But the real pain came the next day, when for the first time in weeks, Sydney didn't come to visit him. That's when Michael realized what he'd done. Looking for ways to undo what he did, the young man asked his parents to bring him a laptop. Since he now had plenty of free time, Michael started doing some research. He tried to find clinics specializing in the treatments of injuries of the musculoskeletal system. It took Michael 5 days to find the medical center in New York where the neurosurgeons thought that they could help him. But before taking the drastic step, the man plucked up his courage and called Sydney to say, "Please forgive me. I was acting foolish. Just tell me one thing. Do you still want to marry me, no matter what?" There was a tense silence on the other end of the line for a moment, but then Sydney answered, "Yes, I still want to marry you, even if you end up being in a wheelchair until the end of your days." Hearing his fiance's answer, Michael couldn't help but tear up. He was overtaken by the feeling of love and respect for Sydney. Before leaving for New York, Michael insisted that Sydney decide on the exact date of the wedding. The young man wanted to know the date before going into the complicated surgery, so that he'd have something to think about and look forward to. Since Michael had to stay in a horizontal position at all times, traveling to New York was a rather challenging undertaking. The thing was that Michael's height was about 2 meters, and his parents even had to come up with some ingenious solution to get their son a bed that fit. Before Michael left for the clinic, Sydney gave him a big kiss and told him what date she chose for their wedding. The young man smiled and felt a surge of gratitude towards his fiancée and parents. Michael's surgery was performed at one of the best hospitals in the US and in the world. It lasted about 12 hours, and according to the doctors, it went well. However, it was still too early to talk about how successful it was, because the guy still had a month of physical therapy awaiting him. Sure, Michael could only move the big toe of his right foot at first, but worked tirelessly to finally achieve incredible results. Step by step, the young man got closer to walking on his own, and eventually, he did. By the time he came to his hometown, Michael could already walk on his own with a cane. Sydney, however, wasn't aware of this, of course. The man wanted to surprise his fiancée at the wedding, which was supposed to take place in 3 days. That was why Michael didn't want to share his arrival date. But when the black SUV stopped at Sydney's house, the woman understood everything without words. Running outside, she rushed to the car, thinking that Michael might need help. Imagine her surprise when her fiancé got out of the car on his own and, putting down his cane, pulled Sydney in for a strong hug. "I love you so much, Sydney," Michael whispered, feeling tears flow down his cheeks. The man knew that his fiancée felt the same, because all these days she was so anxious that she literally couldn't find a place for herself. "I'm never letting you go anywhere ever again. Do you hear me?" Sydney said, putting her head on the man's strong chest. The young people stood at an embrace for several minutes, and then went into the house. Michael and Sydney knew that they didn't have to waste time, because a whole life together was waiting for them, and it was supposed to begin the moment they got married.